Turning now to politics, chaos in Congress, not just impacting politics here, but across the world. Front and center, aid for Ukraine and Israel with huge consequences if it's withheld. Joining us now to discuss this and more is Caroline Heldman, professor of critical theory and social justice at Occidental College. Good morning, Caroline.
Good morning, Giselle. Good to see you.
Good to see you always. Let's start with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky on Capitol Hill pleading urgently for more funding. President Biden at his side, asking Congress do the right thing, stand up for freedom, pass aid before the holiday break, or give Putin the biggest Christmas gift ever. Did it move the needle with the GOP holdouts?
I don't think it moved the needle in terms of what, comparing Zelensky's trip this year to last year, where there was a lot of enthusiasm. The reception from Republicans, especially extremist Republicans, it doesn't appear that, it appears that it was not falling necessarily on folks who were listening. I will say, though, that he made some really strong claims here. Zelensky, we just discovered an 87% reduction in the Russian military. Obviously, a lot of alarms being raised by folks who study this, because allowing Ukraine to fall, it really is a proxy war, right? It would embolden Iran, it would embolden China, it obviously would embolden Russia. It would reshape geopolitics in a way that harms the United States. And unfortunately, it's become essentially a political football here in the United States.
Yeah, with the GOP saying that funding has to be tied to stronger border security. Now, Biden is saying he is trying to work with the GOP, but Democrats say the demands are draconian and unreasonable. Is this even close to a deal?
Well, it wasn't apparently something that was genuine on the Republican side, at least from the extremists. I was optimistic about this because there's so much work to be done on the border. You now have 3/4 of Democrats saying, yes, the border issue is an emergency. So you have bipartisan support amongst voters. You have bipartisan support amongst legislators. And so it did appear that it would be a genuine approach to trying to find some middle ground. But extremists, it appears, are putting demands that are simply never going to happen. And this is a four-decade-long dispute. So it does appear to be politics. I hope that we reach an immigration deal. I'm doubtful that it will happen this week.
As you pointed out, when Zelensky came, the first time he was hailed as a hero by bipartisan support and applause and standing ovations. This time, very different. Why has he lost support?
It has nothing, I think, to do with him or even Ukraine or the situation there. It's purely partisan politics, and it's not even Republican versus Democrats. It really is a civil war within the Republican Party and the extremists who are running the Republican agenda.
All right, let's turn now to aid to Israel, also in limbo, Caroline. So are U.S.-Israel relations, with President Biden warning that Israel is losing worldwide support. He and Netanyahu are now publicly in dispute over what should be the end game. Put into context what this could mean, not just for U.S.-Israel relations, but our security in the region.
Well, it's obviously been a mutually beneficial relationship for 70 years. The fact that Biden is now openly using words like being critical of Israel and saying indiscriminate bombing, he is criticizing the most far-right government that Israel has ever had. And so this conflict, I guess, was somewhat inevitable given the humanitarian crisis that is happening in Gaza and the global response to that. And if you recall, early days, Biden was warning about this, and the fact that his vice president, Kamala Harris, has kind of been the mouthpiece of the administration, being very critical of this. I think moving forward, it could potentially damage our relationship, and I'm more worried about, obviously, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, but the harm that this is doing for Israel on the global stage by not responding to this in a way that, just the 2-to-1 killing of Hamas, their civilians over Hamas. Surely, with such a powerful military, they can do better.
And Israel losing worldwide support and some support here, as you note. So President Biden is obviously aware of how the war in Israel is already impacting his race for the presidency, again, re-election. There is real generational divide, Caroline, on this issue within his own party. Is he in a no-win situation? How does he navigate?
He is in a no-win situation with many policies. Government is about compromise, and his coalition is one that is, cobbled together lots of different. It's a very diverse coalition, and for young people, I think his stances, his compromise stances on the environment, even though I think he's done more than any modern president to advance that, is going to be met with suspicion from young people. His approach to Israel, even though he's highly critical of Netanyahu and what is happening in Gaza, because we are funding it. Like, it's the complexity there. I think he's going to have a really tough time holding young voters come 2024.
Right. And meanwhile, former President Trump blasting on social media that he alone can end the war and avoid World War III. Bluster or not, the latest polls show it's a razor-close race with a Biden-Trump matchup. Whether you trust the polls this far out or not is another question. But how worried should the Biden camp be?
Well, the Biden camp needs to be worried in the sense that we're looking at specific key swing states, and Donald Trump has a significant lead. Obviously, it's a year out. It's ridiculous to kind of project from that. But the fact that it's so close with a man who, I would argue, inspired a violent insurrection and lost in 2020, Biden's got to be asking, how did we get here again?
Meanwhile, special counsel Jack Smith is going directly to the Supreme Court and asking the justices to fast-track a ruling on whether or not Trump is immune from prosecution. What do you expect the court here to do?
It's hard to say, but I will say that in previous cases, even though this is a very conservative court, in previous cases regarding Donald Trump trying to kind of monkey with the system, they have ruled against him by and large. And they said monkey with the system. He's throwing this out there to see if it works. For example, they ruled on his financial papers that they should be open. I would imagine, given that this would set such, I would argue, a terrible precedent that would allow presidents of both parties to engage in indiscriminate criminal conduct. I would imagine the court will rule against Donald Trump. Again, hard to say, but they haven't been a friend to him in past cases along these lines.
All right, Speaker Johnson pushing forward with a vote today to launch an impeachment inquiry into President Biden. Hunter Biden in a live press conference outside the Capitol saying his father was not involved in any of his business dealings and is demanding to testify publicly. Smart move?
Very smart move. He knows this is all about partisan politics. The inquiry is based upon an indictment that neither directly nor indirectly mentions the president links to Joe Biden in any way. Republicans know they don't have anything here. It's a partisan ruse. It's one that's likely to be effective because they will be able to talk about it for many months to come. But at the end of the day, there's just nothing here. No fire.
All right. And before I let you go, I have to ask you about the Supreme Court in Texas ruling against a woman seeking an abortion after learning from her doctors her fetus had a fatal diagnosis and she wanted to protect her own health. Attorneys for the woman say this should enrage all women voters in America. She had to leave her state to get an abortion. What's the biggest takeaway here? And when judges, and not doctors, are making these medical decisions?
I would say my biggest takeaway is they are arguing that the fetus has rights in Texas in that particular case, at the same time that they are arguing the fetus doesn't have a right in another case involving a prison guard who delivered a stillborn because she wasn't able to get emergency care. So it's absolute hypocrisy. So when that happens, I look for what's actually going on, and I would argue it's about control of women's bodies.
Caroline Heldman, professor of critical theory and social justice at Occidental College. As always, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Giselle.